How do you do? The Box Office Pulp Board feels it would be a little unkind to present this podcast without just a word of friendly warning. We're about to unfold a cinematic commentary track, made by a group of men who sought to create a podcast after their own ravings, without reckoning upon God. It is one of the strangest tales ever told. It deals with three great mysteries of the internet: analysis, observation, and deconstruction. I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you. So if any of you feel you'd not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now's your chance to, well, we've warned you. Now, to pause and refresh. For your convenience, we have an attractive refreshment stand in the lobby, with buttered popcorn, golden good and hot from the popper, your favorite candies, wholesome and rich, so delicious Dr. Pepper, so bright and brazen, with tang and tinkle unmatched by any other beverage. Our Louisiana Dr. Pepper at our beverage stand right now, and then return to fully appreciate this bulk and a tragedy.
Did you really think you could destroy this ship? She's defied space and time. She's been to a place you couldn't possibly imagine. And now, it is time to go back.
I know. To hell.
You know nothing. Hell is only a word. The reality is much, much worse.
The following movie is rated R.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Box Office Pulp, your one-stop podcast for movies, madness, moxie, and monthly dives into the B-movies of yesteryear. Tonight, we're continuing our series of commentaries for commercial/critical flops with the 1997 Paul W.S. Anderson space hell movie, Event Horizon. I'm your host, Cody, and joining me today are my co-host, Mike. Say hello, Mike.
But we're recording. We don't need ears to hear.
I'm not sure if I should be terrified or just posting this to Reddit's shower thoughts. And our other co-host, Jamie. Say hello, Jamie.
In a deleted scene, I too have a reverse crab walk.
It's just hours of us flaying you for no reason. It was never going to be in the movie, but we figured as long as we have the torture equipment, why not use it?
That's the only way I'll learn.
I already feel uncomfortable with this conversation. Moving on.
Well, hold on. First, can we just backtrack for a second? I'm really in love with the idea of someone being horrified with the concept of, my God, he's mutilated his ears. Because you don't see that very often.
The ears are important, man.
Oh, it's like Randy Couture.
My God, he can't hear anymore. No, actually, technically I can. I only mutilated the outside. I'm still fully capable of hearing. No, it's muffled mostly. It's not well, but I can mostly understand. The shape of the ear is
important. It helps funnel sound. And on top of that, like you put glasses on, they don't have a catch anymore, so they just slide down your face and you look silly. You'd have to, I don't know, get like those theater monocles that have a little stand on them that you can hold up with one hand.
What an odd ending to that one episode of The Twilight Zone.
Yeah, that guy wasn't really that bad off. I mean...
Yeah, at least he still had goddamn ears. Time enough at last, indeed.
This Thanksgiving, I'm thankful that our audience still has ears to listen to our fine, fine show. We're going to get so many angry letters from people like, look, man, I lost my ears in Nam. I can't believe you make that joke. All right, that's enough. I'm trying to think of jokes they made in Harry Potter about being one-eared, and I can't think if I need to segue out of this. So this is a project for the folks at home. Just think of Harry Potter and think of one-eared people and just assemble your own funny joke / way out of the situation.
One of your people.
Just, put your finest on it. Anyways, unlike our first two entries in Bop in a Tragedy, being Virus and Deep Rising, I think this movie is actually pretty good. Virus had some fun effects, and Deep Rising is goofy and charming, but this, I think, is a pretty effective horror film. I think it has plenty of disturbing moments. I really love the production design. I think it's a legit horror movie. And to further contrast it from our first two movies, Event Horizon somehow doesn't have its own fancy collector's edition from Arrow or Scream or Kino or any of the other boutique labels. Weird. So apparently the worse your movie is, the more likely it will get lots and lots of special features down the road. Anyways, to compound the bummer that part is, the film didn't catch on when it was released, and it was just this huge box office dud. So even now when people talk about it, they mostly bring it up just to say, oh, that's the good Paul W.S. Anderson movie, or just to compare it to the video game Dead Space, which is a gosh darn shame.
Agreed.
Good. I'm glad we're all on the same page.
I'm glad we're all pissed off for this movie.
This is going to be the angriest commentary we've ever done.
But no, it is legitimately kind of an odd choice for the ending of Bop and a Tragedy, at least this round of it, to be doing Event Horizon. I'm sorry, I don't care what sarcastic people on the internet could say, but just a legitimately good movie.
Totally. Yet I will still defend it as our third entry, because this movie, as we will get into, is still laden with tragedy.
Yeah.
And space boats, which are like sea boats. You know, basically the same.
This movie there's a lot of weird overlap between these three movies, particularly Event Horizon. It still forms an accidental trilogy. Madness at Sea Space.
Madness at Sea Space. The same thing the doctor told me. Anyways, before we get into this commentary, I think everybody at home should make a drink to go along with this. This was based off a real drink, but I didn't write down the name, so I changed some of the ingredients, and now I'm just calling it the Event Horizon, and I'm pretending I invented it.
Awesome.
What you're going to want to do, start off with 5 blackberries, 1.5 ounces of gold rum, a ½ ounce of allspice dram, 3/4 ounce simple syrup, 3/4 ounce fresh lemon juice, ½ an ounce of egg white. This part is your choice. I went with a couple of different food dyes mixed together to make the drink black, but you could also get 1 bar spoon of activated charcoal, and then for a garnish, 3 dashes of Angostura bitters. So what you're going to do, get yourself a cocktail shaker, drop in the blackberries, muddle those up, then add all the remaining ingredients besides the bitters, and dry shake it. So no ice, just shake it. About 20 seconds, you want to get the egg whites nice and foamy. Then, pop open the shaker, add some ice, shake vigorously until it's chilled. Then you're going to double strain that into a coupe glass and garnish it with 3 dashes of bitters. Drop in the food dye if you haven't already and get it to the right color you want. What I was going for was a nice deep black with a little bit of hint of red, because space horror, blood in space. And the foamy top kind of makes it look like the cosmos, man. I also added a little bit of silver powder, edible silver powder. Please don't just take flakes of silver, and mix it in there too. So I got a sparkly black, red, foamy mix, and it looks like the Milky Way galaxy to me. It's delicious. Besides that, thematically, I don't have much to say. It's a black cocktail for a horror movie set in space.
I just had a suggestion since you had a little trouble with the name. Call it The Stars My Destination.
I have no bitters and I must drink.
Adds a touch of class to that edible silver.
We're just going to have a list of drink pun names next time, and that's going to determine what our commentaries are for. Didn't we already do Star Wars? Yeah, I don't care, but I have an Ewok pun I have to use. Hair of the Ewok. Or Hair of the Wookiee. Either one I think works pretty well.
Now, folks, what I want you to do with this particular drink is I want you to make it, walk out of your house. Don't drink it. Don't drink it yet. Not yet.
Oh, no, you want to drink it, Mike. This one's delicious.
Walk out of your house. It's a brisk Wednesday afternoon. Make sure it's a Wednesday afternoon. Walk down the sidewalk, down a ways, find the nearest park. Like a park. It's beautiful. It's sunny out. It's a beautiful Wednesday afternoon. What you do is I want you to stand there, gaze around, spy an old, elderly person sitting on a bench. Once you go up to that elderly person who's lived a long, long life, many experiences you could learn from. What you do is just grab that old person by the hair, pull their jaw open. The next thing, like after you've startled them, pull their jaw open, and force feed them this drink, all while saying, "You will now meet the dark inside of you."
I can dig it.
And then you can go home and continue our commentary.
We've given the audience a lot of homework on tonight's show. I feel a little bad about that.
It's work making them. It should be work listening to them.
That's true. That's true.
The old blue collar Mike says.
Legit though, this thing is damn smooth. I'm gonna add this to my regular drink repertoire. So now that you got your drink and you've possibly committed several crimes, we're about to kick this movie off. If you've never listened to a commentary before, it's a pretty basic concept. We're going to talk over the film while we watch it. And if you would like to join us, you can queue up the movie on your own setup. Mike will do a countdown, and when he hits play, you hit play with him. And then you watch the movie, you listen to us, maybe have a giggle or not. I don't know. I can't predict the future. And everybody wins. Like, subscribe, etc. Mike, are you ready?
Can the new tagline for our podcast be a giggle to a scream?
A giggle to a scream. Only if we review killer clown movies, like Stitches.
Ooh, I would like to do that.
Would that be next year's big series?
I have no problems with this whatsoever.
I will commentate the fuck out of Terrifier. But anyway. 1, 2, 3.
The facts were these. On Rotten Tomatoes, Event Horizon... I should have been doing that the whole time. Event Horizon has a 27% rating. Not great. The average rating is a 4.8 out of 10. Out of 73 reviews, 53 of them were rotten, 20 positive. The critics' consensus was, despite a strong opening that promises sci-fi thrills, Event Horizon quickly devolves into an exercise of style over substance whose flashy effects and gratuitous gore fail to mask its over-reliance on horror cliches. 61% of audiences like it according to Rotten Tomatoes.
What I love about that review is you can kind of just take cliche from the end of that sentence and just say, I don't like its reliance on horror.
Cliche is always a very weird complaint in most reviews, like predictable. We ran into that with like Deep Rising and stuff. Predictable, cliche. Now, granted that those things do occasionally hurt films depending on how they're done, but I feel like that's often an overused criticism because no one seems to know what that exactly means whenever they're using it.
I think in this case, there's just a lot of, to be kind, homage going on. Like, the set design clearly has a lot of Alien in it. Everything down to the suits, some of the laser effects, it all kind of harkens back to Alien. And there's a surprising amount of The Haunting in this movie as well. So I can see why critics would go, hold up here. This seems a little familiar. That said, everything is a remix. So that taking those ideas and trying to do something new with them, I'm not going to complain too much unless it's clearly like, hey, they just 100% remade Kill Bill, but now the swords are laser beams.
I mean, that should happen eventually. Also, most depressing opening text crawl in movie history.
Like, wow, we've done
it. If they only knew.
2030. Mankind still developing large steel wall. Couple other facts here, just so we've got all the principal players down while this text scrolls, which, God, I hate this text opening. Our director, Paul W.S. Anderson, who, I mean, I think we all are familiar with for his various franchises, Death Race, Mortal Kombat, Resident Evil. Guy's done some stuff. The writer, Philip Eisner. The music was a two-parter. We had Michael Kamen doing the more traditional elements and a band Orbital doing the more techno-y bits. Cinematography from Adrian Biddle. You might not recognize the name, but he has filmed many of the things you have grown up on.
Oh, yeah.
He got to start working with Ridley Scott as a line puller and clapper loader, but eventually moved on to be a DP for Aliens, Princess Bride, Willow, Thelma and Louise, which was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Cinematography, Judge Dredd, the Stallone one, The World Is Not Enough, The Mummy Returns, Reign of Fire, and V for Vendetta. So, you know, the guy's got his creds. Our editor is Martin Hunter. The movie was released August 15th, 1997, on a $60 million budget and saw a box office return of $26.7 million. Not stellar. And here we have what might be considered the first religious iconography in the movie, with the large kind of cross-shaped window and the hovering man in front of it covered in ritualistic scars. The movie's really loaded with kind of medieval and religious iconography. Makes sense considering the whole plot is, hey, we opened a portal to hell. But I always am interested in that mesh when it comes to sci-fi, that in the future, in space, there's still the concept of God, and how do you reconcile all of the history of Earth into the pure future aspects of what we imagine outer space life will be like.
Yeah, it's amazing how few horror movies, especially how few sci-fi horror movies, really tackle religion. Like the only time you really see religion pop up in horror is in possession movies. And it's always fascinating to see religion portrayed through a science fiction lens. Especially in a movie like this where we get a very a-religious version of hell. But even through that lens, like there's so much iconography that you cannot possibly get away from whenever you invoke the presence of hell in a story. So I was very impressed by how this movie was able to balance both of those things. Like it never feels like an especially religious film. It still feels very grounded in sci-fi, yet you still have those moments like the one we just saw where it's made very clear, like you're supposed to be thinking about certain things while watching the rest of this. We're not going to say it, but it's going to be there.
Boy, this is a bad effect shot. There's shakiness as they go from miniature into the set, and even on the commentary, Anderson mentions like this really doesn't work for him, and it's a shame because I think a lot of the miniature work in this movie is phenomenal. I think the look at this chair, just this chair, this practical design of this weird chair that brings the captain into the cockpit. It's a lot of fun. I really like the practical stuff in this movie.
The movie itself, all the set design, all that is beautiful, honestly. Here's a cool thing I discovered though was the production designer Joseph Bennett. Worked on Deep Blue Sea, which amuses me. But he was also the production designer on Dust Devil and Hardware, the two Richard Stanley joints, and I can really see it in this.
You definitely can. That was something I didn't know.
The grungy but beautifulness of the surroundings.
Just as we mentioned before, there's a lot of the Nostromo going on in this set, and I'll leave it up to the viewer to decide if that's derivative or just the fact that Alien is such a classic, it's almost impossible to make a sci-fi movie now and not be inspired by it. It kind of set the standard for all other sci-fi films where I think if you didn't have something from Alien in your film, people would think, that's weird, something from the set is missing.
Well, that's something we talked about during the virus commentary. Like, at this point, if it doesn't look a little bit like Alien, it looks fake. Also, we have one of my favorite 90s sci-fi things. People undressing and nobody noticing. So it would not be a 90s sci-fi movie without co-ed showers.
I thought you were going to comment on the fact that everybody's smoking in this movie. For something made late 90s, there is a surprising amount of casual smoking. All the good guys are smoking, the bad guys smoke. Everyone is just fine with cigarettes.
It's terribly dangerous.
Even the doctor has no issues lighting up a cigarette.
The future cigarettes, okay.
So we just flashed back a lot of our crew. We should probably introduce the cast, just because there are some very notable names in here. Sam Neill. Do I need to bother going over the guy's career? We all know what he's done and love his movies. There's Lawrence Fishburne, which is the same deal. That guy has just a mile worth of genre cred. Then there's Jason Isaacs, who isn't as well known as Neill or Fishburne, but the dude was Lucius Malfoy. That's a career by itself. But he's had turns in stuff like Armageddon, The Patriot, Black Hawk Down, A Cure for Wellness, tons of voice work, and a lot of television credits. And my personal favorite, Sean Pertwee, who, I mean, not all over the place movie-wise, doesn't have a huge filmography, but I'll always love him just for his role as Sarge in Dog Soldiers.
I give you the shits!
God, I love that character so much. It's to the point where I even got really excited for his like 2-second cameo in the movie Howl. Just like, oh my God, it's Sarge! Oh, he's gone. Okay.
And now he will live forever as Alfred.
Oh God, I forgot about that too. I can't even believe I didn't put that in my notes. So going back to the concept of this ripping off of Alien, I think it's kind of ironic. The first draft of the film that was presented to Anderson was even closer to the Alien films in his mind. He went back and tweaked a few things, such as the original story was about the ship being not actually haunted, but there were aliens on board the ship that were giving people visions. So it was kind of an alien thing where there's a monster on board they had to vanquish. And Anderson said, the classic space monster movie is Alien. I don't want to do a space alien movie because then I'm just ripping off Alien completely. So they retweaked it to have this interdimensional hellscape idea, which I like. I think we get a lot of movies that have touched on this. It's become very popular just from the video game Doom, where it probably started. I don't know when Doom started using the concept of space portals equaling hell, but I think that idea is much less used than the concept of, oh, there's a freaky alien on board this ship that's killing people one by one.
Not to mention there's kind of the elephant in the room of, if they went with that original screenplay, they'd pretty much just be doing Solaris.
They mentioned that too on the commentary. Like, someone on the cast claimed they never saw Solaris, and Anderson was giving him shit. Like, you sure you never saw Solaris?
At least with the revised premise, this comes across as very evocative of Solaris, but with a very hard horror twist.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, as silly as that premise sounds when you try to describe it to somebody, you have to admit that is one of the most original sci-fi horror premises ever. And still has at least a footing in like normal sci-fi conventions. Like, we created a portal, we don't know where the hell it goes, but it's somewhere bad and we have to stop it.
We don't know where the hell it goes? I see what you did there.
Shut up, Cody.
You saw nothing.
That's what I end up loving about Event Horizon. I first saw it because I didn't actually, the first time I watched Event Horizon, I didn't know the hell thing was what the movie was about exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So it ended up unfolding to me very organically. And it did remind me of Doom, which, by the way, there was a Doom sound effect earlier in the film. So they're aware.
That's not the door opening up, I believe.
Yep. I use that classic sound effect. But not enough horror films. Not enough sci-fi films that are going for horror actually use a lot of supernatural elements, particularly of something like Hell. There's not a lot of crossover between those two types of horror films, and I've always thought that's kind of the most ripe area. Because you get it in Doom, but that's more of an action thing.
Mm-hmm.
So to see something played straight on that, to me, it's a more interesting combination because we've seen the period pieces or things like The Exorcist or whatever, that the whole dominion of something else invading our world. You don't see that on a sci-fi scale. And I like the merging of those two worlds more than if it was just something taking place in modern day. Because it feels something that's alien to us, plus something that's alien to the physical world interacting. Which is what makes, I think, a lot of the sequences in this movie so unique and actually helps break the mold of the alien thing and actually creates more of like a twist where, yes, everything's very evocative of Alien, even the crew members, but when they go on there, they all do feel like characters from Aliens. Like, it has kind of that setup, but they're not really heavily armed, they're not Marines or all that. They're kind of evoking those characters. And then you put them in that place and you kind of watch the movie break down the tropes of that through something unexpected, which is actually introducing hell itself instead of an alien entity. So I don't think it's intentional. It's definitely not intentional, but it ends up having kind of meta quality to it, but almost a deconstructionist quality to it on sci-fi films.
I like how when you stopped saying that, Neil was saying, none of that was true. He was just finishing that line exactly when you stopped talking. Damn it, Neil, quit tearing us apart. So right now we're going into the explanation of the plot mechanic of the movie, of how they expected to move faster than light, and the wormhole idea, which goes into the dimensional gateway of hell. I'm not sure when this idea was started. You see it all the time in sci-fi movies now. I think it was like a Stephen Hawking idea that sci-fi writers really latched onto because it's far enough out there that it's very interesting, but it's also something you can explain very simply, like this movie does with the folding piece of paper. A lot of our viewers are probably familiar with the concept from the show Futurama, because I believe was how the ship traveled in that cartoon as well.
But I would fucking love if Sam Neill said, "It doesn't move through space. It pulls space around it."
But I wonder if Hawking's paper, whatever it was introduced in, came out around this time, because you don't see a lot of stuff from before this. I can't think of any offhand that mentions the concept. Something like Star Wars, they just say, "Oh, we're going to, hyperspeed." They just engage the hyperdrive and whoosh, away they go. They don't bother to explain the hard science behind it. And Futurama came out late 90s, so it was about the same time as this. So we might be seeing like the birth of a trope right now where they've appropriated the idea of wormhole travel. I'm sure our science listeners are like, "You idiots, this came out like in the 70s. Everyone's known about it for decades." But oh well, I'm not a science guy. I'm not Bill Nye it up here.
I still feel like this would have been better explained with an ant crossing across a string. Also, I hate to follow up that very good point with something stupid, but does it bother you how much Sean Pertwee and Jason Isaacs look like brothers?
Yeah.
I love the way they play off each other, too. They could have. I like the early little insert shots of Isaacs taking a drag off a cigarette and then carefully tossing it across the table to Pertwee so he can smoke it, and then Pertwee fucks up and drops it on the ground and has to chase after it.
There's so much little character moments in this movie, like just Fishburne going, "Smitty," as soon as Pertwee walks in. Like, you really believe that this is a crew that has a lot of affection for each other and is very, very uncomfortable with some guy showing up and dragging them out of their vacation.
Yeah. It's actually kind of amazing because all of these actors have, well, I shouldn't say all of them, but a lot of them have gone on to do other really big movies or chains or franchises, whatever. You hear about them and you know about them from other things. But at the time, they were still cutting their teeth. So it's really cool that the casting agents on this were able to pull together this good of a group. Like, did they kind of lucked into it? Or, well, I'm assuming it's their jobs at skill.
It really works out because you feel immediately ingrained in the group. And The film actually does a good job of, despite the fact we've been introduced to Weir before all of these characters, because of the way they act versus the way he acts, and even though he's been introduced as the main character, of course, that's kind of a switcheroo thing, but we feel uncomfortable that he's interacting with them because they all seem chummy.
They're all very chummy, and they treat him like, oh, this asshole. No one wants to be Weir's friend, and he's very standoffish in his character. So yeah, you get a clear divide between the science guy and the rescue team.
It's almost like an old Western, where there's all the cattle rustlers, and then there's the company man coming here to tell us what to do.
On that point about company men, I was very relieved watching this movie to find there was no evil Earth conspiracy to be doing this, and there was no evil corporation like in every sci-fi movie now that was doing all of these nasty things on purpose to develop an ultimate weapon or take over even more of the galaxy they already own. There's no Weyland-Yutani orchestrating things for once. It's just like a weird, horrible happenstance accident that bumps into this rescue team. It's a horrible accident all around. It's not orchestrated as part of a large conspiracy, and that's very refreshing.
Also, I think it heightens kind of the scare factor of the concept by making it accidental. It's the idea that, we accidentally opened a portal to hell, and now, we're being ripped apart by chains. It's even Doom has kind of it on purpose in many ways, but that's going for a non-horror vibe, so it works. I think you actually diminish the vibe, the horror vibe of it if you have an evil human behind all of the supernatural bullshit.
Yeah, and it changes the mode of the movie as well. If there's an evil corporation, it immediately shifts the thematics in the movie into a story about human greed and that kind of stuff. If it's a government, then it's a political story. If it's just happenstance, then you can go off of it and spin into other areas. Like this one, they choose religion instead to focus on. Of course, there's also the idea that this new advanced spaceship opened a portal to hell, which kind of goes into the original mode of horror where there's that idea of technology bad, which is really regressive and not my favorite mode of horror, but often some of the best horror movies are centered around that concept. Hell, look at Frankenstein.
And it makes it almost Lovecraftian in a way. Nobody is coming into this with bad intentions. Sam Neill, it's such a shame that the briefing scene was cut, because you basically get to hear Sam Neill monologue as part of his character introduction, how the event horizon to him is the only thing that's going to save humanity. He says, without Event Horizon, human evolution begins here. We are trapped on this planet. So he has, as much as he's a character that's kind of ruled by guilt and a certain amount of arrogance, he does have good intentions. And like in a Lovecraft story, when people try to broaden their minds and explore beyond what should be the human reach, they are met with the infinite, and the infinite always breaks them.
Damn you, Pikmin and your models!
That's that scene also, if it were in there, would set up a more interesting, I think, dichotomy between Weir and Miller, where Weir is for the greater good, and Miller will not leave a single person behind. Mm-hmm. And I that's obviously what the film's going for main thrust, but it still works because you do the character, the protagonist switcheroo between Weir and Miller, but with you losing that added scene, there's not a lot putting those two against each other other than Weir is acting like a dick.
Right here, we have this tension, which doesn't even seem that founded. Okay, dude, I know you've been waiting several years to see your ship, but doesn't it make sense to go check it out and make sure it's safe first and do the rescue team having done their job?
Yeah.
If you look at it from a logical point of view, it's like, yes, of course the captain's right. Give him 10 goddamn minutes. The ship's not going anywhere.
There could be bees in there. Yeah, that scene is actually like a weird treasure trove of stuff that would have made this movie work a lot better. Like there's that amazing atmospheric moment where they listen to the recording that is left behind at the event horizon, and you could hear a pin drop as soon as it ceases, and behind Sam Neill is a model of an old-timey ship. Like it's not subtle at all, but I just love Anderson going, yes, think about that. This is an accursed voyage. This is the Demeter.
I've always been thoroughly charmed anytime movies try to do zero-G without the use of CGI.
It is
like
charming.
Old-time sci-fi where it's like, here's some strings, we'll edit those out. Just kind of kick your feet a little bit and we'll film in slow motion.
I'm amazed that this movie was originally going to be completely weightless.
Like, could you imagine trying to do the vomit comet in one of those suits? Like, you just feel miserable until all of a sudden, I'm free as a bird, and then it all just crashed down back on you again.
Well, considering they couldn't sit down or stand for too long, I think they'd appreciate being weightless for a moment.
Just that one brief second of joy. So, we've already had some big CGI shots in the film. The major one being Sam Neill's introduction, where the camera pans and spins around, shows he's actually on a satellite, and you can see Earth behind him. Apparently that one took up something like a third of the effects budget by itself. And you have to remember, this was 97, so this is pretty progressive to go for all of these effects in a movie. Most of them don't hold up. All the debris kind of floating around in the corridor looks very fake. Whenever someone walks through something like a floating bit of coolant, the CGI there really bothers me.
Oh, yeah.
Paul W. Anderson has had his fair share of movies with really dated CGI, and I guess that's what he gets for being an early adapter. This one works out, though, because there's so many practical things going along here. These lasers, I mean, that's just a little bit of smoke in a room, so those stand out. The costumes are fully real, as the actors would probably let you know, because they were like 70 pounds or something insane.
I love how haunted house that scare was.
Oh, yeah. Oh, floating hand.
See, Virus, this is how you do a haunted house movie. Yeah, that's kind of the tragedy of Anderson. He is a director who has proved time and time and time again that he does not know how to utilize CGI well, yet it's his obsession. He's like a mini George Lucas in that respect.
Ooh.
So very similar to Stephen Sommers as well.
Yeah.
Going off the idea, though, of the practical parts of this movie saving it, this set design, holy shit. Damn. The meat grinder hallway is amazing. The way it's lit just makes it look like nothing else in sci-fi. Oh, man, I could just stare at it all day long. I think that's amazing. Plus, I love the effect it had on the crew. Like, trying to walk through that thing was like being in a fun house, so they could never walk a straight line, and they're always falling over.
Oh, fucking footage of Lawrence Fishburne going, whoa! It's the funniest thing in the world.
Well, apparently even Biddle, when he wanted to film it, had to do like these kind of long takes that zoom in, or very steady shots, because he couldn't walk a straight line down the thing. They didn't put dolly tracks on it. So if they try to do like Steadicam stuff, he would just kind of wobble all over the place like he was drunk.
So we're entering the gravity drive, and this is it's weird to talk about the artistic nature of Paul W.S. Anderson. So in the script, the gravity drive was very sci-fi looking. I think it was like a black orb, like suspended in the air or something. It was a very smooth, pristine, clean space. And Anderson's thing was, after he decided that it should be hell instead, was also the gravity drive should look like the Lament configuration. It should have that kind of a vibe to it. And he did end up bringing in Clive Barker to consult on the look of the film.
I fucking love.
See, I figured he just sat there and he went, this would be great if somehow we could just make maybe like a sort of a bomb design that Batman might have to defuse in one of his big climatic adventures. Every time I see the bomb in The Dark Knight Rises, I go, did they just raid the Paramount prop store and just go, this is good. I don't know what it's used for, but we can use this.
Here's what's fucked up. So the bomb in Dark Knight Rises looks like the gravity drive in Event Horizon, and in Interstellar, McConaughey explains fucking folding space the literally exact same way Sam Neill does in Event Horizon, which means that has to be intentional.
And Nolan's a big Anderson fan. I can see that. So, God, correct me if I'm wrong. If I've got the timeline right, this is the movie that gave us the trope of 90s swirly ring designs. Because immediately after this, we have Dark City, X-Men, Contact. The official aesthetic for Fancy Science Machine in the 90s was spinning metal rings.
That is true.
City was 97 as well, I think.
Yeah. Imagine Rufus Sewell just tied to that thing.
Oh, shit. Dark City was actually 98. Yeah, this was before. So I've heard some complaints saying that, this is style over substance. There's no reason why Weir should have designed this machine to look so medieval. To which I say, go fuck yourself. A movie's not allowed to have a cool design.
I never understand that complaint. It's supposed to look fucking cool and weird and shit. Doesn't matter if it's not functional.
I don't give a shit if none of this makes perfect logical sense. It's impressionistic. It's who cares? It looks amazing. It sets a mood. It does what it needs to in a horror film.
It's spooky.
Also, Hellboy had rotating fins as well. That was an interdimensional portal that brought Hellboy back. That was 2004, so apparently the trend is going strong.
Well, I always take enormous umbrage with the complaint of style over substance, because
sometimes style is the substance.
Exactly. Yeah. The director knows what it's doing. Style is substance. Why do you, sometimes you enjoy a particular work of art because it's meaty and it leaves you with a lot to think about, and sometimes it just looks aesthetically pleasing. You wouldn't look at a Renaissance painting and say, that Renoir, it's style over substance. It just looks pretty.
Those shadows are all wrong.
What was Rembrandt trying to say?
Night. That Starry Night's incorrect. Van Gogh, you silly bitch. So right now, apparently, whoever designed this, I think the joke they made in the commentary was it was a Star Trek bridge. Because anytime something rumbles, the ship just explodes in a shower of sparks. Again, not logical, but it makes a wonderful graphic when you just have characters diving and just little sparks flying all around them. I don't understand who would make a keyboard that's filled with gunpowder, but it's neat.
Well, how do you think these spaceships have the self-destruct mode? My God, all the space is getting in.
Zoom. Also, and this was conjecture on IMDb, but the spinning rings in the Meat Grinder are supposed to be the rings of hell, like in Dante's Inferno, leading up to the center of hell, which is the gateway. Considering the rest of the imagery in the film, sure, maybe. I don't know.
I believe Anderson actually did talk about that at some point. The entire tunnel, there's, is supposed to represent each ring of Dante's hell, because there are different passageways you have to enter to get to the gravity well.
And there's a bunch of floating cans of chicken around the gluttony ring.
Delicious.
I like how in the space I can say cans of chicken, and that makes sense.
Cans of chicken.
Just cans of chicken as far as the eye can see. What a wonderful future we live in, son.
Oh, it's dry. This truly is hell. Anyway.
And you rip your eyeballs out.
Turkey's a little dry.
So as we're seeing right now, I think the ocean is a great setting for horror, and also space is just a perfect setting for horror. You're on your own. Nobody. Oh, the corpse call. I want to talk about this for a second. One, what a fun special effect. Two, a little bit of trivia. When they filmed it, one of the special effects guys took a Barbie and baked it into the gore in the center of the dummy. So when it collapsed, they just had a frozen dummy they dropped on the floor to shatter. The first time they did it, it broke all apart, and in the center of it was just this gore-covered Barbie doll. So they had to reset and do it a second time.
Oh.
Which I think would have been a fun Easter egg. Just leave it in, see what people think. Like, why was there a Barbie in that man?
My God, he went through hell.
That's what hell is, having Barbie dolls shoved into your anus.
Okay, this gore will be cut later.
What I love is what an odd troll that is to the movie.
Everybody
edit around this.
But yeah, to the better point than dolls and dummies, it's space. It's perfect because you can't cheat. No one can rescue you quickly. This is the rescue team, and we already got a title card that said it took like over 50 days to get there. They have 20 hours to survive this trip because they're running out of air. They're truly on their own, which is just perfect because you have that isolation. You don't have to do anything stupid like, my cell phone can't reach center command. It's already taken care of just in the premise. Plus, everything in space really wants you dead. There's the cold, there's the vacuum of space, there's the lack of air, there's no gravity, so you're just floating around. It's hard to move, it's hard to see. Everything about space is designed to kill people. It's perfect for horror.
Disease and darkness. Disease and danger wrapped in darkness and silence.
God, could you imagine McCoy in this movie? My God.
Hell not being able to affect him.
Have they ever done hell on a Star Trek episode?
Shockingly, no.
Weird. That should have been the Kelvin timeline. That's how it starts. They accidentally enter into the hell dimension.
Oh, that's how we were going to meet Chris Hemsworth as Kirk's dad.
They just jump back, and then they come to our universe where all of the characters have goatees. Oh, the real Mirrorverse!
To reference this twice in this commentary series, could you imagine if that was just what the Nexus was? It's just them passing through hell. It's Chris Hemsworth just chopping wood forever.
And one last thing about the scene we just saw with the giant gouge in the ship releasing air. I love that ticking time bomb element on top of everything else. It really adds an urgency level to the movie. It's not just that it's haunted. It's not just that there's a chance, they could all die. One guy's in a coma. In the back of your head, you're always worrying, if they don't hurry up, they will run out of air and suffocate. I don't think the movie does a good job pushing that angle. Like, it's a plot point throughout, but you never see anyone stop and be like, boy, I am dying of oxygen deprivation. It just, it kind of gets pushed past. Like, no one has a physical symptom due to it. But in concept, I really like that idea to just turn the heat up on the situation a little more.
They never let you forget it, which helps a lot. Like, they don't do a good job of showing anyone being affected by it, or it never really feels like an immediate danger, but it adds a nice added element of danger. That's kind of different, too. You don't really get the CO2 thing in most of these. It's usually just, we're running out of air, not, we're just, every time we breathe, we're slowly killing ourselves.
Plus, it works as a good plot device, too, to get people to move around and go to different parts of the ship. So, I mean, it's a central part of video game movies set on spaceships, I've noticed. Like I mentioned before, this was a huge inspiration, in my opinion, to the video game Dead Space. Just in the ship design, in the general plotting, the idea of religion mixed into space. But one of the deals, if you ever played that game, it gets frustrating because there's a central tram that takes you around the Ishimura. And it's really just like, we need a screwdriver. Go to the West Wing. And then you fight through a bunch of rooms, have monsters pop up and try and kill you. You mutilate them, you get to the room, you flip a switch or like grab an item, head back, and they're like, great, now that you have the screwdriver, use it to turn on the radio. It's up on that side of the building. And you have to repeat all of that in a different side. And it's a lot of things that drag out the experience. You're not just trying to get from one end of the ship to the other. You have to crisscross it back and forth to do all of your little tiny busy work goals. And I feel like they might have picked some of that up from here because they do have pieces like that. They're not just checking out the gravity drive. They have to do things like, okay, let's go over to the med bay, check on this character. Let's go look for a broken fuse over here. Let's go fix the broken valve that's releasing air into space. They've invented a movie that has the structure of a video game, which
there is a lot of minutia.
Great advantage of.
Which is something you would never peg Anderson for. Like, you don't look at the guy who made the Resident Evil franchise and think, that's a guy obsessed with minutia. But there are so many microscopic details in this movie that really fascinate me. Like the fact that he went as far as to design custom flags for each of the crew members that are speculative sci-fi fiction flags. Like the American flag has 55 stars. The English flag has an EU symbol. And the Australian flag has the Union Jack replaced with an Aboriginal symbol. Which you would never fucking notice unless you just pause this movie and zoom in and pay super close attention, but that was really, really important to Anderson. Like, this was him trying to be Kubrick.
I'll never quite know what went wrong with Anderson. He just started becoming a parody of himself and then kept parodying the parody over and over again until all the parodies overlapped and it was just a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. The Anderson who made the last Resident Evil movie isn't the Anderson who made the first Resident Evil movie, or the Anderson who made the second Resident Evil movie, or the Anderson who made this, or Soldier, or even Three Musketeers, and especially not the Anderson that made Mortal Kombat.
Or Shopping, which is a hell of a thought.
An odd journey. And I'll go back. As a kid, I thought Mortal Kombat was the shit. I had a poster of Mortal Kombat hanging directly over my bed, so I got to stare up at that cool dragon logo each night. To interrupt that thought, this was one of the segments that was originally a little longer in the movie, where we cut down, see the boy's sword-covered legs. It cuts back to her, and then we cut back a second time to the legs, and this time they're covered in maggots. And apparently that was a step too far for audiences. They just were revolted by the idea of a child covered in maggots. And it was one of the things that was jettisoned after the first preview screening. It was just too much for audiences. Maggots, not even once.
And I don't even really quite know what she's reacting to.
Yeah, you get the sores there, and you see your child for a second earlier, but it's never quite explained, what's going on with your kid. You see he's in a wheelchair, but it's kind of flyby stuff you can miss easily. Anyways, back to the Anderson stuff. So yeah, I had the Mortal Kombat poster in my room. I loved it. And that was a huge success for him. The budget on Mortal Kombat was about $20 million, and it brought in over $120 million at the box office. Huge success. And he's kind of said that gave him the leverage to do this movie the way he wanted to do it, mostly because his last film was a huge success, so the studio wanted more of that. So then we get Event Horizon, which did not do well at the box office at all, which is a shame, because going back and watching those two movies now, I think most of you would agree, Mortal Kombat doesn't hold up so well. Event Horizon, pretty entertaining still.
While Event Horizon is definitely Anderson's masterpiece, I will go to bat for Mortal Kombat. That is exactly the movie Mortal Kombat needed to be.
I think the tone was right. It's just there's some very dated parts. Again, like Reptile being that weird CGI critter and some of the other. We don't need to get into Mortal Kombat.
That's a later Bop It a Tragedy.
I will fucking do a dead serious commentary for Mortal Kombat at any point.
Back a second ago, I think we got our most cube shot of the film. Anyways, after Mortal Kombat and Event Horizon, he did Soldier, the Kurt Russell unofficial Blade Runner spinoff, another box office bomb. But then he pulled it back together, got in the studio's good graces with Resident Evil, which grossed over $100 million. It spawned 5 sequels so far. They're trying to remake it at the moment. There's been like a CGI trilogy unrelated to the movies. The video game series has come back being popular. Big deal for him. And most of this didn't impact me. I haven't seen Soldier to this day. Resident Evil was something I didn't see in theaters, so I didn't have an opinion of it. It was Alien vs. Predator that caught my eye. Because as a kid, also a huge fan of Alien, huge fan of Predator. I couldn't wait to see these two movie monster classics go at it. And I missed it in theaters. I was so bummed. It only played for like 2 weeks or something in my theater, and I didn't get a chance to see it. I was so desperate, I actually downloaded a copy off the internet, like a really shitty cam video. Half of the movie was the back of some guy's parka. Didn't matter. I still got to watch the movie, and I couldn't believe it. I was just devastated by that film. And I couldn't believe it that the guy who made Mortal Kombat, my favorite childhood movie, also destroyed 2 of my favorite childhood films. I know that's being, way overboard. I spent years just going on movie forums to bitch about this film. I know I'm being dramatic. But at the time, I really felt like I'd been betrayed. Naturally, when the sequel came out, I forced all my friends to go with me to see it opening weekend. But Alien vs. Predator still made $172 million off of a $70 million budget. It was a success. I just was so weirded out. I felt like he killed 2 of my favorite franchises at one time. And I don't know, that's one I revisit every so often, and I think I should like it more than I do. And for some reason, I just can't bring myself to love it.
Yeah, I do honestly wonder sometimes, did Anderson just say to himself, well, the time I went prestige didn't work, so time to shit it up? Like, I wonder if there's like if there's any kind of cynicism to that. Like, is he just intentionally not trying? Because if that's true, not trying has been extremely lucrative for him.
Yeah. Anderson clearly likes schlock. Like, he's always enjoyed working in that realm. He's kind of talked about that sort of stuff. I think Anderson wants to do prestige schlock, but he's shown a lot of talent here and there, obviously with Event Horizon pretty much all the way through. Even Event Horizon has schlock appeal to it. But the schlock in it is prestige schlock. I think Anderson, when he's making stuff like Resident Evil and Alien vs. Predator, which even that in hindsight isn't, I hated that movie when it first came out, but I've kind of come to appreciate it to a degree.
And going off the idea of prestige schlock, just that phrase to me immediately makes me think of the facehuggers jumping through the air in full slow motion.
Yes.
Like, that's the epitome of that phrase to me. Like, it looks really slick, but then you think, like, okay, what? You've completely destroyed the original premise of what made that scary.
Yeah. And you see that even with, like, his Three Musketeers and stuff. He seems to be going for a kind of tone. He just... I hate to be this, like, black and white about, but just failing at it miserably. Like, I don't think Anderson doesn't have talent. I think there was a time where he was more self-aware about what he was going for, and that fell away over time. And that's why he just kept ramping up with things like the Resident Evil pictures. And considering they kept being more and more successful, he felt like the ramping up was a good way to go.
Oh yeah, if it makes money, why not do it?
Yeah, so it makes you lose perspective after a while. So the Anderson who made this is different than the Anderson who's making like Monster Hunter right now, or who made the last, all the Resident Evil movies, honestly. It's just going for something different than I think what he discovered he had been originally good at.
Yes, I just want to follow that up by saying my ideal of prestige schlock is Lawrence Fishburne saying, "What are you trying to tell me? That this ship is alive?"
Alive, you say?
We can make a supercut of people reacting to the supernatural in angry ways that are fun. Like Childs in The Thing. Do you believe any of this voodoo bullshit? Just a supercut of all of those reactions. They're always highlights of the movie.
A Frankenstein monster in this day and age?
I'll say one of my favorite moments probably in any horror film has to be when Justin's convulsing on the table, saying, "He's coming, the dark," and then cut to a flaming burnt man coming out of water. Like, I'm just, sexually alive right now.
I love this shot so fucking much.
Earlier in the movie, I mentioned that this is a bit of The Haunting, and Anderson mentions this as well in the DVD. He says, well, in my mind, this is a better version of The Haunting than the remake we got in 1999. And you can see a lot of the same principles of the big scares in that movie are being here, is the knocking, the slow pull-ins, more sparks. I think Biddle's done an amazing job filming this film as well. Compared to Virus and Deep Rising, this is the most active camera we're going to get. It's constantly kind of moving around the actors. It's kind of snake-like. It's pulling back. It's very active. It feels like an actual human being is standing there watching all of this. And there's such a big switch when it's those dramatic high-tension scenes. The camera work gets a little bit more frantic. You get the Dutch angles, like right now. Dramatic close-ins. And then that haunting effect on the doors kind of turning into like a jello as something pushes through them. Biddle, even though he's working on a genre flick, goes all out. Like, he wants you to see all the tricks he's got at his disposal and does a wonderful job making disorienting, offsetting scenes even more powerful. Also, maybe the guy just couldn't find a tripod, so he's like, fuck it, we'll figure it out.
Well, I love how much the cinematography of this movie and the set design complement each other so much. Like, one could not exist without the other. It's like a perfect mishmash. It didn't surprise me at all doing research that they intentionally designed the ship like a Gothic cathedral, but just folded in on itself.
Yeah, he mentioned like he looked at the idea of a cathedral, and if you just turn it upside down, you can maybe slap that onto the engines of a ship, and that'd be your thrusters. I mean, I think that's kind of a classic architecture design trick too. What if we just took a normal structure and made it upside down? It's fresh but familiar. Wait, that wasn't right. Justin's near death here. Spoilers. One of the most disturbing to me in the movie.
Oh, yeah.
The idea that not only does he go through the coma, but he comes out of it, wakes up, goes in this airlock, then realizes, with just enough time to realize what's going on, but not enough time to fix it, that he's screwed. He's going to be shot out of this airlock. His eyes explode. His veins all swell up. And then he lives. You have to think, like, he might have been better off dying. But that ties into the captain's whole thing. He can't let someone die. He's got too much guilt. So even if he's saving a frozen near corpse that may never wake up, he has to do it to assuage his own guilt. And this is the most unintentional joke in the movie. But when Baby Bear here goes to push the button and then does the switcheroo at the last second right here from inner to outer door.
Which is just for him.
Like, no one else can see that. Just, no.
Like, that's just an instant meme.
It's to fuck with the audience, but it's one of those, like, that's always been hilarious to me.
Yeah, it's a shame because it's that tinge of schlock.
Yeah, it's that stupid little bit in there in what's an otherwise really effective, unsettling scare. I hate this. The dude's powerless. He did it to himself, but he wasn't in control of himself.
Yeah, you never see anybody come out of the possession right before they die.
It's something I love about the way, I guess, the entity of hell is kind of played and how it fucks with all of them is what was the name of that alien movie with, ironically, Mila Jovovich again?
The
Fourth Kind, right?
The Fourth Kind, yes.
Oh, I thought you were talking about something set in space, not just with aliens. Okay.
But Jamie and I love that movie because of the fact the aliens are fucking evil and malevolent, and which you don't usually see. And I love I mean, it's hell, so obviously it's evil, but the pure malice of it, the way it actually fucks with you in a way you don't usually get in a horror movie. So of course it unpossesses Justin after he presses the button so he can have the full fear of what's about to happen to him.
Just to be a dick. And it's kind of a running thing in this movie too. People realize what's happening just a second too late. When Peters falls off the bridge, she realizes what's going on right before she falls. When Pertwee realizes where the bomb is, he gets to see it with like 5 seconds left on the countdown, so he can't turn it off, and he can't run away. He knows he's just going to explode. There's a lot of moments in this movie where people just have to come to terms with their mistakes in about 5 seconds and then die.
If only there was a shot at the end of Weir looking down and going, "Did I cut off my dick?" Explosion. God, I love the columns in this movie.
I know.
I can just stare at those forever.
Oh, yeah. Fun little detail here. If you look at Isaacs, throughout the first half of the film, he's wearing a big vest loaded with medical tools and doodads and props. And apparently that was Isaac's idea because he had watched a lot of sci-fi films as a kid, and his favorite was just seeing all the utility belts on people. He said, if I'm going to be in a sci-fi film, I want to be loaded down like that. I want to look like I'm just decked to the nines. And then halfway through the film, he told Anderson, "Why did you let me do this? This is dumb." Because props were constantly falling out of his jacket and ruining takes, or he had to keep track of all of them for continuity, and none of them were secured. So at a certain point in the movie, he just ditches the vest. I'm pretty sure because of that conversation. Although I imagine... movies aren't shot in chronological order, so I'm sure they had to do a lot of fiddling back and forth to make sure the vest should or should not be on in any given scene.
Oh, God. To be in charge of continuity on an ensemble film must be the real hell on earth.
Oh, God. We need more Polaroids.
Also, I love this.
Pulling my eyes out.
Speaking of schlock, hey, look outside that window. In space.
Ghost smoke.
It's the little thing, and I don't even say that as like shitting on anything, but it's to make it look like it's a dark and stormy night outside.
Yeah,
we just got lightning with the lights flickering.
It makes the frame more interesting. So fuck the logic. Here's something that's going on because it is a better look. If that was just a black, that'd be boring. But having the clouds just move past it slightly makes everything feel more alive and engaging to the audience.
Pays to be schlocky when you know what the fuck you're doing.
Oh, yeah.
So I think this scene does a good job representing the different types of scares we have in this film. There's type 1, where there's something unsettling going on, and the camera really does the work to let us know we should be unnerved. And here's all these kind of whip turns as we look down hallways and there's no one there, but we still hear the voice. It's effective, unsettling horror. It's a little bit psychological because we don't see much, if anything. Second type, upsetting gore shots, which we don't have any here. And then 3, cheap jump flashes, like right now, which adds in the upsetting gore shots, so it's kind of a mix. In my mind, the jump flashes, the jump scares in this movie fail more often than they hit. Part of that was probably just due to the fact that they were rushed to edit this thing down, So I think they didn't quite tweak it the way they should have. But there's a lot of examples in my mind of jump scares that simply do not work. Sam Neill, when he's shaving at the start of the movie, and then the window blinds open quickly, or close, I can't remember the order. That never lined up in my mind enough to be effective. That scare right there, I mean, the pause is a little bit longer than I expect, but it still isn't an unexpected scare. Something about the timing is just off, where it doesn't make me jump. There's a lot of these quick things happening that never land. There's just the editing isn't tight enough to make it really connect with me.
Oh, considering this movie was edited in what, a couple of weeks?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not surprising. Like, it's a miracle this movie is coherent at all.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they had their initial cut that they went and showed that was over 2 hours long. And the audience felt it was too long. The studio really didn't care for how long it was. And they requested that, 30 minutes or something be cut out. And Anderson agreed because the movie was too long. Part of the problem was they did the screenings in America, they filmed in England, and they had to load everything up and travel between countries and get everything set up and do the editing, on the side. So he had something like 4 weeks to do all this work between screenings. And, there was a week of travel in between the two. So it was more like he had 2 weeks to truly do the editing and get a lock on this thing. And that's with removing 30 minutes of film out of a 2-hour picture. So I can definitely sympathize with why Anderson wasn't happy with the final product. They had to move too quickly to nail a lot of things. And that's, just a shame. Because I think if he had used all of his time to work on delivering one good hour, 45-minute cut, we would have had something really, really special. Or maybe I'm just pretending. I don't know. I've never seen the extra footage.
Anderson's rough cut was rushed. He didn't like it. He didn't want to show it to anybody. He had to edit together the first rough cut in just a very short amount of time. Usually, Writers Guild rules give you 10 weeks. He did, I think, in 3 or 4. It's the time he had to do the rough cut that got shown to test audiences.
Yeah. He had 10 weeks, but I think because he was doing some reshots or something like that, it cut into his time without him realizing it until he's like, oh, fuck. Gave away 40% of my time or 60% of my time.
And there was a set release date. It was like a whole fucking mess. So he showed a cut that didn't have completed anything in there, that the edit itself wasn't even complete.
Yeah. And
that's what they went over for the test audience, which was Anderson didn't expect it to go well, and it went as disastrous as he thought. And he did want to cut it down, but he wanted to cut from the 30 minutes, he wanted to cut maybe 15 to 20. Just pacing stuff. And the studio decided all the gore needed to go pretty much. It needed to be way leaner, way shorter, because the test audience said it was long.
So can this be PG-13?
So that equaled super short to them. And it was
Plus, the movie made it to the review board, got an NC-17, so they had to go back and cut out even more gore.
Yeah.
And that just happened.
And one of the even more of a tragedy is only a year afterwards, one of the studio executives went, "No, we were wrong."
It was John Goldwyn, the actual head of production for Paramount, said, "Yeah, we screwed that up. We could have had a much better movie." And they offered him the chance to actually go and make a real director's cut for them to re-release on DVD.
And that's when the search began.
Yeah, and that's when another tragedy strikes. They had to go literally around the world to track down all of these missing elements of the original work prints and stuff. And they found them stored in odd places. One of the stranger ones was apparently an abandoned salt mine in Transylvania.
I love that so much.
But
and that's what I want to know. To what end? Was it cursed?
Ooh, hold up. We're also getting what I think is the most effective part of the movie, the hell orgy.
Fucking
so fun,
awesome.
Just holding eyeballs, the fingers going down a throat and ripping out entrails. A lot of it's hinted at, but I mean, the blood you do get sells everything else. Fun story to go with this. I first saw Event Horizon in college. I didn't really know what it was. I heard people online talking about it, saying it was pretty spooky. I lived in an overflow room, which basically means it's twice the size of a normal dorm room. We can have more people in it. So we would do movie parties pretty much every weekend, just invite people in. I'd drag out a movie and we just watch whatever I had. A lot of horror movies. So I dragged a bunch of people into my dorm. We stole a couple of couches, some pallets. Everyone sat in and watched Event Horizon, which turns out is a lousy party movie. It just ruins the mood for the evening.
How depressing.
So we got done watching Event Horizon, and my roommate basically turned to me. He's like, I never want to see that again. I'm like, oh, you didn't like it? And he's like, I was terrified.
Good.
And apparently the hell orgy was the thing that really did him in. Like, he was fine with the rest of the movie, but those shots just completely freaked him out, and it was way too much, and he had a hard time sleeping that night. He just didn't like it at all.
Well, it's a party gone wrong. I can understand why that was a bad party movie.
I was close to ripping my own eyeballs out, so I know the feeling.
If only it was the full cut version.
I know, it's amazing to think that in the hypothetical director's cut, that would have just been a chunk of the movie. Like, there is a extended version of the finale you can watch where when Weir gives him the vision of hell, what you see of hell is longer, like in that one scene, than all of the shots of hell in the existing movie. Because I think edited all together, they're like 30 seconds.
Yeah. I kind of like that touch, though. Just, it leaves you wanting more, which is maybe better than seeing too much hell and going, oh, hell is kind of silly.
What? The little bit of footage that exists of the stuff they shot is infinitely gnarlier than what you see in this movie.
Oh, yeah. They spent a lot of time filming the hell scenes. They said they spent like weeks putting it all together to use like 20 seconds at a time.
Oh, fucking Anderson was pulling 7-day shifts where he would just film that second unit on the weekend, essentially.
Yeah.
Like, away from the watchful eye of the studio.
And, okay, two things. One, I love for some reason the way that the drive is alive and the way the lights light up. It's almost like it's talking or something. I just love that little touch. But the big thing
me a ham sandwich, mortal.
So the big thing with the visions of hell and the orgy is Anderson was pulling from Hieronymus Bosch for like all the visuals in those two sequences, and you can still see some of it from what we get.
We did just see Peters walking through a coffin-shaped door, and there's another one. These things aren't exactly subtle.
Not at all. Schlock, prestige schlock. Because I think Anderson, with the production designer, went and looked at a lot of like medieval paintings and whatnot, and discovered Bosch that way. If you don't know Hieronymus Bosch, just have some fun on Google image search for a while. It's good stuff. He was severely mentally ill and was hired by the church to invent hell, essentially. And it's gnarly and fucked up and weird and sexual and just diseased, honestly. And that's what's in a lot of the deleted stuff, and that's what's a shame to have lost.
Jesus, that's brutal.
I love that shot. Normally, when someone falls off a great height in a movie, there's like a car in the way to block the bottom of the shot, or the camera cuts quick to give the illusion they have crashed into the ground. That one, they did an amazing job, really, with the dummy and all that to make it feel like, oh, no, we really just watched her fall several stories.
Such weight to it, and that explosion of blood.
So I am personally holding out like hope against hope that this is going to be a Nightbreed situation where like 10 years from now, someone's going to find the director's cut of this movie in a yard sale. Oh, here's just the entire work print.
Yeah, a few years ago, Anderson did say all the elements they had found were too damaged to use. So they found pieces, but the only really surviving prints now are on video. And they could do a Nightbreed thing where they do their best to digitally clean up the video, but you can only do so much there. And maybe they just splice in standard def images with high def. That's an option. People always are a little bummed out, but geez, there's only so much you can do. They went to Transylvania, for Christ's sake.
They battled Dracula.
Like, honestly, I'm fine with it if they, because I know Anderson in 2017 said that, well, he'd found it a little while beforehand, but found a VHS of the rough cut. But when he finally was able to watch it, it was just too degraded. Because that's the thing. When it's on video, it's just a ticking clock. Because it just degrades sitting there.
Right.
Honestly, I'd be fine. You know what? Fuck it. It doesn't look good. I just want to see what the movie was supposed to be. Because as it stands now, it's great. Like, it's fucking awesome. It's very effective. It's a solid kind of instant classic. But damn, is it hard knowing that there's like the real vision of it is just not here.
Two things about the scene. One, it always really bothered me that her closed eyes still have eyeballs behind them. In my mind, if you have no eyes, there shouldn't be anything bulging your eyelids out. It should be like flapped in. I don't like it. It doesn't. Ugh, that bothers me for some reason. Not even in a disturbing way. I'm just like, it doesn't seem feasible in my mind that she'd have bulging phantom eyes. Two, earlier in that scene, Sam Neill looks around and his vision goes, "I'm home." And he'll say that, I think he actually already said it earlier to one of the other characters, "Oh, I'm home." Another connection back to The Haunting. Nell in that movie kind of has a similar arc to Sam Neill here, where she goes to a place that everyone else finds sinister. She falls in love with it and decides this is where she belongs, and eventually destroys herself so she can stay there forever and no one can pull her away from it. Neill does essentially the same thing. He sacrifices himself to this evil, lets it possess him and control him, just so he can force everyone else to stay on the ship with him forever.
So I love how, going back to the weird accidental trilogy that these three movies are, I love how all three of these contain a character who responds to the madness on his ship by going native and becoming the main villain.
That was
my God, he's taken all of it.
It was a huge surprise to me watching this film for the first time, though, because I expected Sam Neill has to be the main character. He's introduced first.
He's the most famous person in this movie when it was made.
Right, yeah, so you just assume, oh, that's the guy. And it was very confusing to me because everyone else in the movie treats him like an asshole. From the second he walks on screen, the whole crew is like, this dick is making us quit vacation so he can go on a wild goose chase. They yell at him for not using layman's terms, and he's just trying to explain the science. And they're constantly at odds. And then it makes sense when it flips and you realize, oh, he's the science dick. Like in a 1950s movie about science gone wrong. That's his archetype. And we're not supposed to like him. He really is the bad guy, and he's ruining things for all of these good, hardworking space rescue folk.
You can't kill the alien. I have to study it.
Exactly. Also, boy, this is like the most tragic part of the movie. Him just finding the bomb and the reaction Pertwee puts into this, just the pathos, just the pure, like, I've lived a life of regret.
It's so randomly realistic.
Just that, 4 seconds of, I am very sad about everything that just happened. It communicates a lot in a little.
Yeah. But the great thing about the protagonist, movie fucking with you thing about who the actual protagonist is it makes rewatches so good.
Oh, yeah. You can kind of pinpoint, like, okay, this is when he started going loco, and it just, I don't know. There's maybe not as much to it, because he kind of flips a switch at a certain point, compared to some other things where there's a clear motive. But just that whole change in perspective makes a second watch worth it.
Now that,
because he gave in to the madness in that movie theater.
I'm glad you think of that as well. It's very similar performance. But speaking of performance, also this, just all of this. This is spectacular. Every bit of this.
Fuck.
Like this is where we get the seeds of future Anderson. So
yeah.
This scene will later become his entire career.
At least here it's delightful.
Like, why wasn't this the tone of Jason X?
God, it should have been.
God, could you imagine Anderson doing Jason X? He would have brought that home.
Hey, look, Wally. We also have the very disappointing surprise exit of Isaacs here.
Yeah.
The first time I watched this movie, this character just gave me the heebie-jeebies. Like, there's something about the intensity in his eyes where I've never trusted. Like, you see Isaacs in any movie, and you're always like, that guy's up to something and is evil.
He always feels like the villain.
And now I'm like, okay, so this really creepy evil guy, the villain, in my mind originally, before we find out that's definitely not the case, gets to go against the actual villain. This should be a mano-a-mano huge fight, and then immediately killed. It's a great surprise. Also, something that was dropped from the movie, a lot of the characters are killed by representations of past trauma or fears. And for DJ's character, it was supposed to be that he had gone through some traumatic surgery earlier in his life. And if, the shirt's off, you can see that big scar running down his body. Something that's not really truly elaborated on in this version of the film. We get him being killed by surgical instruments, and we see his body hung up later with the flesh all peeled back. But I think unless you're watching the special features, you're not going to make those connections on your own.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that was like 90% of what was cut out of the movie was just going into every crew member's specific backstory and nightmare.
Yeah. Like this part, apparently DJ was supposed to, even though like clearly dead, still lift his head up one last time to freak out the captain.
Yeah, Miller was supposed to kill him to put him out of his misery.
Yeah. Which would have been an interesting twist for his character because, as we mentioned before, he saves Justin, even though that's a character that's maybe never ever going to wake up and has just had his eyeballs exploded out of his head and also saw hell. So probably not going to be a happy dude if he ever wakes up. So that would have been a good turning point for the captain where he kills that guy and then realizes he can make the ultimate sacrifice of himself to save everyone else.
Yeah.
Okay. The extended version that you can find on YouTube even has Fishburne just breaking down completely and vomiting and just looking at his reflection on the floor with like blood streaked across his face. Like it's really intense. Like it, as cool as it is to see Lawrence Fishburne respond to that by immediately grabbing a sci-fi gun, I think the film would have benefited from that very real moment of, oh my god, I just saw a dude cut open.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just such a shame no one like what's sitting somewhere. Like what this film is fine, but what the film is supposed to be will just break your heart, honestly.
But that said, I am still amazed by how much this movie works because I like all the other movies in this series, I only watched these recently for this series, and I was always under the impression that people liked Event Horizon because it was a chop to shit movie that had some really good parts and it was fun imagining what could be. Kind of like how I felt about Nightbreed before the director's cut was finally found. But no, this is just a great movie. This is just a really, really good sci-fi horror.
Yeah. Despite the cuts, it's still spooky. It's still effective. I love all the practical things. Like I think the gore that stands in the movie is very well done. I'm a sucker for old school practical miniature model spaceships too. Anytime I see one in a movie, I'm always like, yeah, this makes me happy. There's a lot to love in the movie.
Oh, if you didn't know there was any like, studio interference, editing crap, you really wouldn't notice. You're like, oh, this movie's a little soft in places with character stuff, but you wouldn't think anything was really wrong with it.
No, I really was amazed to learn how quickly they pulled the movie together, editing-wise. Like, it was so rushed, it's a miracle it's this coherent.
Like, how is this not fanboys?
Yeah, the biggest thing I can complain about really is I think the jump scares never got the attention they needed, because those have to be technically perfect, or they do not work for me. And I've seen in big budget horror movies, really well done otherwise, jump scares that simply don't work because there's something missing in the punch, in the way they were designed. Not to rag on the version of It that we just got a few years back. I love that movie, but the scares, the jumps, it never worked. Even in a theater with giant speakers, they never got me to hop. And that's strange because there's a lot of low budget kind of crappy horror films that will get me to pop out of my seat. So it's all just about technical greatness.
Oh, the perfect jump scare is a goddamn art. That's why, like, I understand why people kind of roll their eyes at jump scares in movies because it can often come across as very cheap. Mm-hmm. But when it's bad, you notice.
Yeah. Look at The Conjuring if you want good jump scares. James Wan is the king of them.
Oh, yeah.
The Conjuring 1 and 2 in theaters were just amazing experiences because there's so many moments of great tension and then huge jumps of relief. They work so well, and that guy is just a genius when it comes to that side. He can really make you hop.
I just want to say, prestige schlock.
And God, fucking O'Neill's performance.
Oh, he's having so much fun.
Like I've heard people say like, oh, Sam Neill is kind of like maybe a little miscast. He gets a little hammy when he becomes like weird beast or whatever this thing's been nicknamed.
The chair.
But that's why you get Sam Neill, because Sam Neill, I love how he's never forgotten that he was a horror guy. Like, he was Damien. Like, the reason he's in Jurassic Park was because he did horror movies, and he kept doing them afterwards, too. Yeah. Like, he has fun with this stuff. Like, he's enjoying playing, like, Chaos God Sam Neill right now.
I can just imagine him getting this script and saying, oh, I get to play satanic Alan Grant.
Fun little contrast in acting styles, and one that was apparently a huge headache for Anderson. Fishburne likes to do his acting in about 3 or 4 takes. Like, he comes in, he wants to hit all of his lines perfectly and brings all the intensity for the first few takes. And after that, he starts to lose energy and he'll, like, forget lines. He really wants to nail it, and he's good at doing the practice and effort to get it done perfect the first time. Neill is the exact opposite. He likes to do a lot of takes and then improvise and work on it and go in with a much looser idea of what needs to be done until he nails it just through kind of experimenting. So you have a guy who only wants to do 4 takes and another guy who wants to do like 8 takes and only gets good after the first 4. So in those 2 shared scenes, he said it was a nightmare because they basically had completely opposite styles for how they wanted to do their takes. Not that they had a fight or anything. It was just, how do you get the best performance out of these 2 guys when they really need opposite things?
Solving a math equation.
Kind of.
Yeah, acting gets talked about in very like artsy, lofty terms, like very esoterically, but it always amazes me like just how nuts and bolts it can be like that. Like, okay, I want to be here 30 minutes, you want to be here 2 hours. How does this work? Welcome up.
Go, space pipe, go.
Don't hit me.
Don't hit me. Leave my ADR alone.
I love that this is a 90s horror movie where the survivors are a blonde lady and 2 black dudes.
The fact there's this many survivors at all is really impressive.
Well, we all forgot about poor Justin.
Of course. Everyone does.
Poor
the film kind of
baby
does.
Bear. They show him in the tube. They just kind of stow him away. He's no longer a character.
Well, once again, that's kind of hurt because there were some other scenes involving like him in the tube, but gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably the biggest storytelling casualty of the cut down is you kind of forget that characters are in the movie or where they are in relation to each other.
Or even like Stonk, like what? I can't tell you anything about her character, which is a shame because almost everybody else is overloaded with personality and she's just kind of there.
She's British.
Yeah. They don't give her a lot of moments, and I don't know if that was stuff that was just cut or they just didn't have enough time to develop that big of an ensemble and her character just suffered for it.
I know there's supposed to be backstory stuff between her and Miller, and that's stuff that probably ended up on the cutting room floor.
Yeah.
I like to think that her vision of hell was being unconscious.
This fucking bit, I love this so much. It's just so fucking weird. Like, and then the ship starts bleeding. The idea that the ship itself became alive because hell possessed it, like it's this weird extension of hell, that is so unique and cool.
Like, that could have been the movie by itself.
Yeah, but to cap it off, we get the Shining homage, which is a strange thing to do because the Shining blood elevator is so iconic. It's impossible to show dropping blood coming out of something without making the audience think of that shot. At this point, it's almost an homage, or not an homage anymore. It's like a parody if you do it. Like, people are just gonna laugh and go, "Oh, The Shining." I would say, like, no one should ever do the blood drop again because it's already kind of been tapped out and totally dried up by how memorable The Shining is.
Yeah, but all those weren't in space.
Just make the walls bleed. It's fine.
Walls don't bleed in movies enough.
The walls in the 53rd precinct are bleeding. But I kind of feel like that is very intentional on Anderson's part. Like, part of the reason he took the script was, this is The Shining in space, I'm sold. And I feel like that's him saying to the audience, okay, in case you didn't get it, I want you to compare this to The Shining. I want you to have that in your head while watching the third act of this movie, because it's about to get cuckoo bananas.
So
we're getting to the third act of an Alex Garland screenplay here.
While they were filming that fire hallway, they burned down the set. They had a flamethrower built to shoot the flames forward, but it was pushing out so hard that it tipped over backwards and started shooting flames at the ceiling of the set. Anderson asked the effects crew, "Hey, could you put out the fire?" And they said, "No, the off switch is next to the flamethrower that's shooting flames everywhere." Because that's just a wonderful design for your flame gun. Then it tipped over and started shooting flames into the floor. Apparently there were some combustible gases there that they were worried could have exploded, so they had to abandon the set and then bring in like a fire crew to put everything out. But they almost exploded their entire set instead of just burning it down. Ah, Scorpion!
Okay, two thoughts. One, I love how the ship pulled Weir back in for a final transformation. Because A, final transformation, and B, the fact he could pull him back in from space somehow, like what does that mean? Like, how far does the power of this thing stretch? And I love the implications of that.
Well, they didn't just pull him back. He's got new peepers.
Yeah, because it's like, okay, is that literally Weir, or is that like an idea of Weir that it created?
It gets blurry because they're about to punch each other, so there is some physical form of Weir there.
It's all the Bosch stuff.
A sequence that's like 40 seconds in the extended version.
Yeah, you can see still pictures as well of that set, and it's like, yeah, it's definitely just recreations of Bosch paintings, but like on a space station. It's fascinating.
There's a lot of space barbed wire in there, though.
Well, who doesn't love space barbed wire? You gotta keep the space cows out. But this ending as well, besides the fact there's still more cut out from it, I think Anderson explained like there's a whole monologue cut out, I think, of this bit, or maybe even earlier, I don't remember, where it is actually spelled out like, no, it's literal hell. I mean, which does still come across, but you know.
Oh yeah.
It is weird, like, the actual, just, like, no, it's not a sci-fi thing, it's literally hell, is actually cut out. But this is, the ending of this movie is a little bit weird. Third act-wise, it works, but it's a jigsaw puzzle, sewn together ending of two alternate endings that were filmed because of, test audiences. And then the other test audiences couldn't decide which one they liked, which alternate ending they liked more. So the studio was like, can you somehow edit the two alternate endings together into one ending? So that way both of those test audiences will be happy.
The true meaning of compromise.
Leaving the original ending completely out of the equation.
As wasn't the original ending just Miller battling the Burning Man?
Yeah, well, there's like 3 different endings. I forget exactly what the first original one kind of entails. I think it is him battling the Burning Man, but it's like, it's fairly different, I believe. I think we're still involved. Then there's the alternate ending of him just in the room, but that fight is just with the Burning Man. It's all pretty much the same. Then there's a longer thing with Weir. So, like, the Burning Man morphing into Weir was just them doing an effect to try to combine both cuts. And even, like, everything even after this is, like, a combination of different things. Like, there's little bits of the original ending of the crew being found, but, like, the jump scare is completely added. It wasn't in any previous ending. There was, the original cut had a jump scare. It didn't have a jump scare, but I think, she heard the screams of the Event Horizon crew again or something, and then was woken up. There wasn't, like, the hammy, over, like, really out of place, he takes the helmet off and it's weird thing, like, doing a scary voice. That was completely 100% just invented, like, because the studio wanted an extra jump scare.
Yeah. And boy, we already complained about fake ending jump scares in A Virus, and that one felt really bad. This one, I give slightly more of a pass to. And I have a couple ideas for why that is. One, Event Horizon just has a lot more goodwill going for it at this point. I've enjoyed the film a lot more than Virus, so I'm willing to write off a kind of dumb ending. Two, with all the supernatural stuff happening, even though she isn't literally back on the ship, I think it's semi-implied that the supernatural elements of hell have somehow stayed with her.
Yeah.
You could interpret it as a very
with weird
dark ending. Yeah, it's still in her head, and she, might think she's doomed from this point. She's seen hell. She has to go back to hell.
Yeah, it's a nice mirror to Weir's introduction with the ship already reaching out to him in his dreams.
I just wish it was, something different, like maybe Weir's in one of the tubes or something. Not that, he takes the helmet off and he has a scary line.
Yeah. It would play better if he didn't look like Dark Helmet.
Yeah.
Complete with the same mask going up effect.
And yeah, with all the makeup scars too. What if, he popped up in the helmet and it looked kind of like Weir and you weren't sure? Like, what if they had just put Sam Neill in there under heavy prosthetics? And it's not even really a jump scare. It's kind of ambiguous. What was that him? I don't know. That's way too late to consider adding, so I guess it'll never be.
Also, just because Event Horizon couldn't be awesome enough, it ends with a Prodigy song.
This has confused me because the opening and end credits are this kind of dancey 90s music that really dates the movie, just locks it into 97. Whereas the rest of the film has a much more traditional horror score. And I don't know how I feel about the blending of the two. I think, if I were king of the world, I probably would not have used these songs to open and close things.
Oh, Anderson wanted Orbital. He worked with Orbital on Mortal Kombat. Orbital, of course, did the Mortal Kombat song that's so famous.
Right.
And Anderson wanted to bring him back to do some kind of weird, like, text score. The studio balked at that, wanted something more traditional, so he brought in Kamen. But was able to get Orbital on to work with Kamen, so it's like a half and half score. Like, they kind of work together. It's why it has a very weird vibe to it. Because it's actually kind of a blending. Kamen and Orbital actually composed together for it. I really don't know why this music choice is over the end credits, or why that techno song plays over the beginning. Yet I'm perfectly fine with funky shit playing over the end credits, just because it's it's a good song. It's a good time to end. It's a good time. We had a good time.
Good time. I think people underestimate appreciate how important the impressions are at the start and end of movies.
Yeah.
Like, if a movie has a really strong opening, you've got a blank slate. You can put in anything you want to start a movie. And if it's got some good, interesting, mysterious score, you're going to be drawn in, and you're going to leave the movie with that in the back of your head, like, wow, I really, like, I was feeling good at the start of this. And then at the end, if you end with this song, you feel like you're about to go to a rave. And that's not what we saw in the movie. We just saw a woman who might now be insane get pulled out of a storage tube after all of her friends were murdered, pretty much. And boy, it puts a sour note in my mind. I still love the movie, but I'm like, boy, this just doesn't add up. I don't get it. If it was something a little more somber and then they used this a minute or two into the credits, I think it'd be perfect. You know, I don't mind this. I just don't want it right after that ending we got. It totally goes against the tone and muddies the water.
What would have been a better song for this to end on? A bad cover of Desolation
Turn down
Row.
For what?
Also, to answer your inquiry earlier, Mike, I just learned from the credits he is the Weir Beast.
I saw that Weir/Beast, which is a strange term to go for, considering he never sprouts hair and runs around on all fours.
Well, it's what Sam Neill calls his cock, Cody. Listen, can I just say I was so happy whenever I got to that third act and saw that this is another movie that has my favorite old horror trope. Horrible men covered in blood giving monologues about the other side.
Slowly turning in a space chair. About a dimension of pure chaos.
It's like
the space chair is the best part of the movie.
Almost the entire reason the void exists, I'm convinced.
Honestly, if the third act was just Sam Neill in that makeup covered in blood giving a fucking speech about hell, 10 out of 10.
Wow, funk shit performed by Roger G.
As it stands now, solid 8 out of 10. Which is high, and not at all really fits with Bop and a Tragedy, but it's a tragedy of what happened to Paul W.S. Anderson as a person.
Well, we've seen the basic germ of an idea taken to three extremes. With Deep Rising, we got the goofiest shit version. With Event Horizon, we got kind of the prestige version. Right in the middle is Virus, which is kind of nothing.
It doesn't know which one it wants to be.
Yes, this is when you get a movie that's right down the middle and cannot pick a side. And you get Donald Sutherland not taking off his cap.
Also, can someone make a fucking sequel to Event Horizon? It's still out there. It just went to hell. It can come back at any point.
Hell's still there. No, it landed on Neptune. All they have to do is populate Neptune, and they could just combine this with Dead Space. Now the marker is just the Event Horizon, and that's how they make hell, and the unification happens. There's Lovecraftian monsters. Mutilation's still a big part of the film. Limbs are getting cut off left and right. It all fits together, people.
Do it.
You joke, but could you imagine if that was the plot? The Event Horizon crashes to Neptune. Neptune becomes hell. So hell is just a fucking planet now?
I would say you could do that. They show the Event Horizon going down with the wormhole open, and it lands on the planet and kind of sinks into that cloud and disappears. But you can't see what's under the mist. Hell planet. Headcanon.
Here's the fucked up thing. Neo would still totally be into it.
And they can put him make an Event Horizon where you can tell
tomorrow.
That he's 70. Yeah.
That's a missed opportunity.
Weir as the Lord of the Hell Planet.
Oh, I want it so bad. It's such a great concept. And it's so it's what I love about the ending of Event Horizon is they don't actually stop anything. No, there's just hell has a way of just coming in and out of our world whenever the fuck it wants.
With the Event Horizon cruising around like Queen Anne's Revenge.
There's so many story opportunities, alas. But you know what? There is a great
tragedy.
There's a great fucking story about this that I think is good to go out on. While making Soldier, Anderson was kind of lamenting everything that happened. The movie kind of failed. I think at this point the studio had come back and been like, hey, can you go back to your original cut? We're sorry, blah, blah, blah. And he was showing the film to Kurt Russell. And Russell said after it finished, Russell really liked it because of course Kurt Russell fucking loved Event Horizon.
The man saw Aliens himself.
Only like 2 years earlier too. That's the best part. Russell said like you're having a hard time with it now, but in like 10 years you're gonna be so glad you made that movie. And Russell knows his shit because 10 years later, this became like an all-time cult classic.
So you're saying instead of doing Bop and a Tragedy, we should have just had a series on the wisdom of Kurt Russell.
We could literally do a podcast on that.
God, I hope that I am lucky enough, like in my darkest moments, to have Kurt Russell put his hand on my shoulder and give me some sage advice.
It'll be modern-day Kurt Russell with the big Santa beard.
And you know what? Paul W.S. Anderson took that advice and wasted it on a series of Resident Evil sequels. So, it's more of a story for us.
We have to learn.
That was a fun idea to go out on. Let's take this positive story and then twist it. Here's your knife.
Bop and a Tragedy.
Bop and a Tragedy. Anyways, folks, that has been the commentary. If you've enjoyed this and you didn't pick up on it before, we've done 2 other entries this month in the series. We have Virus out there. We have Deep Rising out there. We have a whole smattering of other commentaries that just aren't gathered around that theme. It's the same basic principle. You'll love them. You can find all of that by looking up Box Office Pulp on iTunes. You can find us on Stitcher. We are on Twitter, and we have our own Facebook page. Please like all of those. Leave us a review. I'm not desperate for them yet, but it's getting close, guys. Definitely appreciate you checking all that out. Thank you so much. I think that's a wrap. Get the hell out of here.
You get more out of life when you go out to a movie. Please remember to replace the speaker on the post when you leave the theater.
That entire commentary, we forgot the movies that Anderson turned down to make Event Horizon.
It's true, yeah.
Quick, after credit scene. Jamie, read them.
Because we got Event Horizon, we did not get the Paul W.S. Anderson versions of Mortal Kombat Annihilation, X-Files, Fight the Future, X-Men, and Alien Resurrection. Now, I'm glad we've got Event Horizon, but could you imagine the seemingly impossible alternate reality where Mortal Kombat Annihilation is good?
Like 6-year-old me definitely can.
I like to think the sky would still rain ninjas.
What if you made the exact same movie? Like, it was literally the exact same movie.
Well, the effects certainly wouldn't be better.
Too bad you will die.
I feel like this podcast is going to go out, and somehow randomly Paul W.S. Anderson will listen to it, and then we'll just rag on the entire time. It'll just be sad, and I'll feel bad.
He knows what he did.
Be our friend, Paul W.S. Anderson. And can you change your name? I don't want to have to say Paul W.S. Anderson every goddamn time.
He's probably mad about that too, I feel. Like
probably.
Those two have to get together every couple of years and fight for who gets to keep their initials.
Well, why not just be Paul W. Anderson? Why make it complicated?
What does the WS stand for? Does anyone know?
That's a good question.
Well, I can find this out. I'm on Wikipedia. William Scott.
Well, that was disappointing.
Yeah, I was... All right. Huh. It, makes sense, yeah.
This is Box Office Pulp Guy, and this has been a Pulp Podcast production. Now please, 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 put a gun in my mouth and pull the trigger and say goodnight.
And now, on with the show.